you talked about sort of comes in with a lot of work that I do. So I'll give you a little bit of background. I came to the UK at the age of 12 with my father and siblings, and I was abandoned 3 years later here in the UK. So naturally, coming from an African country, the essence of family is very much, you know. So me being the elder sibling, I quit school to work in the market to try and look after my younger ones. I didn't really understand nothing about social services or anything like that. And also I didn't want my family to be separated. So a year after social services got involved, when one of my siblings got in trouble in school, I had a physical fight with social services. In the end, I got an agreement with them to put the 2 girls in one family and then the 2 boys in another family. But because by that time I was over the age of 16, I was not the concern of the social services. So I ended up sleeping roughly on the street. I got involved with the local gang. It took me years to actually get myself out of that situation, where I lived in the Midlands and worked with somebody's ID. So the minute I started earning too much money, I was arrested and sent to prison. And this is where my work really began. So in prison, I was trained by Samaritans to do listening and peer support. And I really enjoyed that because issues of mental health had never really occurred to me, because in our community, this is something that we don't talk about. You know, mental health, oh, no. You mean a mad person? No, we don't, you know. So, and it's quite funny because now I make a little joke in my counseling class and even amongst my family. And people say something like, well, why did you go into it? And I said, well, my parents must have knew something on the day I was born. Because my initials is MAD. My initials is mad. So somebody knew, you know, something that I created. So after my prison sentence finished, the government then decided I still had no status, so they wanted to deport me. So I ended up in detention for 2.5 years. And while I was in detention, I saw the impact that the mental health had on people, and I was seeing in large numbers of people who looked like me who was going through this issue that I didn't really understand. So I used my privilege of being able to speak, and the little schooling that I had here kind of gave me confidence to. And I'm a troublemaker, so I like to challenge. I like to challenge, you know, people and authority in general. So I started using my privilege as having a training from Samaritans to do peer support, which allowed me to go to different wings within the detention center to speak to people. And I remember the first instance was every month we had a meeting with the governor. And there was one individual who everybody had tabled as a troublemaker. And he kept talking about how he smashes up his cell, he does all these things. And I asked, I said, has anybody spoken to him? And the governor says, well, I can't go around speaking to everybody. And it really shocked me. So I said, okay, well, I'll go and speak to him. And I was really touched when I went to speak to him. He said, the police came to my house to pick me up 3 o'clock in the morning. My wife was due to give birth in a week. I've been here for 3 weeks. I've not spoken to my wife. I don't know how the childbirth went. I don't know anything. And every time I try to speak to these people, nobody wants to listen. And I get frustrated, I get angry, so I smash things. That was hard for me to hear. So I had to get clearance from the governor to give him my phone, to make a phone call. And the very next day, I was sleeping, and he came to my cell and left the little box. And I was sleeping at the time, so I didn't really think of it. So when I woke up and I opened this box, he had all this medication that he had been collecting from other people. So I went to him and I said, I'm not sure why he gave me this. He says, those were the medication I was going to commit suicide with. I no longer need it. Yeah. So from then on, I was really touched by just one single conversation. Simple. It wasn't nothing. It didn't take me anything. So I began to speak up for a lot more people, and so the government has this a policy that anyone with a disability is not supposed to be detained. But yet, in detention, I would say that everyone in detention has a disability. Because it's better to be in prison, and I've experienced both. It's better to be in prison than detention. Because in a prison, you at least know that you've committed a crime, and you have an end date when you go home. In detention, nobody knows when they're going home. So you're stuck there for God knows however. So I started speaking up for a lot more people, and that also gave me confidence personally. The more and more I challenged the governors and authorities, the more it gave me confidence. And I was actually, in the end, I was actually kicked out of the detention for causing trouble. Because what I was doing was, when people were being put on a chartered flight, and when I say chartered flight, I'm talking about cargo plane where they hire and handcuff people, there's no seats, and put them on. And I said to the governor, and I says, do you know you're repeating history? He says, what do you mean? And I said, well, how do you think the slaves were moved from one place to another? So because I used that, I was deemed a troublemaker. And they kicked me out from one detention center to the next detention center, where I continued to do the same thing. So I used to apply something called judicial review, which meant that the minute the court receives it, that individual will be removed from the plane and not be deported. And of course, I'm not a lawyer. I don't have no law degree, but just being in the library and reading a lot. And in 2014, the detention center actually said, no other detention center will have this guy, so let's just release him, because the longer he's here, the more he makes our work difficult. And I hadn't realized my time in this institution, how long it had impacted on my own mental health. Since I was released from detention, I was actually a section for 3 months in a mental health hospital. And luckily, I had such a large a connection within the community. And one of my best friends is a medical student. And she was able to come to the hospital and say, and explain to them that actually this wasn't a place for me to be, because of my history with detention and everything. I needed to be in the community in order to get better. So they released me from there, and it was only when I started actually owning the fact that I had mental health issues, and it wasn't a bad thing, that I could actually overcome it. And I started getting better. So I went to an organization that I used to signpost a lot of people to when I was in detention, called Detention Action. And I went to them and I pitched an idea to them, what I wanted to do, and they helped me set it up. So we call it Free Voices. So I regularly visit people in detention, and when people come out of detention, I have a peer support group that I first meet them on a one-to-one, or meet them on a weekly basis to make sure that they're okay. But then we go through a set of trainings that helps them to speak out and campaign against the injustice of detention. So I've done a lot of campaign work, and my loud mouth allows me to go places and challenge these issues. And I remember one of my first lobbying talks I was doing was with a very prominent black MP who I won't name.
Oh, go on. We won't tell.
Is it a woman or a man?
Yeah, go on, ask him.
Well, if I say it's a woman, then I can't.
So we know who it is.
Anyway, so I ended up with her, and I pitched what I was talking about, and she says, Michael, I agree with you, but the time, so basically my campaign was a 28-day time limit on detention, which has now had a second reading in Parliament, but the immigration bill somehow disappeared under Brexit. So the idea was that this is done intentionally. And when I say intentionally, not many people understand what I'm talking about. But we have 96 to 98% of the population in detention come from the Commonwealth countries. But yet you won't find no Canadians and Australians in that list. So it's done intentionally. It's done to make sure that a certain group of people are being traumatized. And this is a trauma, the UN report actually showed that this is a trauma chamber. So I sat in front of this MP and I said, what are you going to do about it? And she says, well, I can't fight for any person with a criminal record. And those with mental health issues, I mean, what are we talking about, 5 or 6? Which I kind of wanted to reach over the table and grab her hair and say, listen to me. But anyway, but I realized one thing that was quite common was that whenever you got passionate and spoke about these issues, you were deemed as being too aggressive, too violent, or whatever. So I went on a few trainings. I said, I'm not gonna shut myself out, as in kill my spirit, but I'm gonna try and find other ways of communicating with these people, which I did. But the whole issue has been the fact that in detention, you have, for example, Jerome was someone who had schizophrenic, and another guy, Ben, with speech impediment, and these individuals were often called stupid, even by the black population in there. Because he's just stupid. Like don't talk to me. He's just stupid. And I remember the day I saw Ben on the outside when he was released, and I went to meet him. He grabbed hold of me and held me so tight for about 5 minutes that I felt my bones was going to like literally crash. And I says, dude, I'm happy that you're out. And he said, I'm happy to be out, but I'm more happier to see you. So I went to Parliament with him to kind of showcase what we were talking about. And once people sat down and listened to him for 5 minutes, they realized that there was an issue that needs to be talked about. Detention, the way detention has grown in this country is, when we talk about the hostile environment, the whole Europe is a hostile environment. And let's not kid ourselves. Every section of service providers within our communities and largely as a country is made without thinking about us. It is done without thinking about us. And mental health, if you go into mental health, you realize that you can have a white person and a black person with the same issue. The white person will get counseling, and the black person will be in an institutional ward. Because within those wards, if you're section 2 or 3, if it's section under one of those, they're allowed to test any medication on you without anybody's consent. And this is still going on today. Right? So it is of their interest to put as many of us in those places as possible, because these places are also funded by the pharmaceutical companies.
The statistics prove that, because black men particularly have the highest instance in their mental health services. So black males are disproportionately outnumbered in mental health services, and that's not good, because if black males are a minority in society and there are a disproportionate number of them in mental health, that says a lot about the way the mental health system treats people.
And it's been a fight that so I went into counselling because of this, because I needed to understand what is going on within this culture that affects us so much, but yet we don't quite know why. And you realize within my first year, I realized that there was not a single reading material that was done by a black person on my whole course. So, as I do, I kicked up fuss. And they said, and they actually, the idea is they actually acknowledge that counseling is a very Eurocentric idea. And they would say that to you.
Very much so.
And so I will pick things. I mean, although I came to this country quite young, I still have a very strong cultural understanding. And I'll pick things out and I says, well, this isn't your culture. You've stolen this and whitewashed it. So don't tell me it's an Eurocentric idea. Right? It's just that you are not using these methods and applying it and thinking of anybody else. So I had a chat with the dean of the university, and we since had a lot more Franz Fanon. We had a lot more black readers in our text. But the issue goes deeper. Because in our communities we're not talking about mental health issues, we are easily picked off. Because when a white person is going through any mental health issues, there will be an outcry if that individual is treated wrongly. For example, if you look at Yaleswood is a female-only detention center. And there's been cases of not just mental but physical abuse, rape by guards, and so forth. But where is the feminist movement outcry on this? Because it's a black issue. So you wouldn't hear any of the mainstream feminist people going on television or the news and crying about this, because this isn't, it doesn't affect, you're not gonna find a white person in detention center, period. So,
we have to fight our own battles.
we
cannot be waiting on other people, and that's what we need to do.
This is the key, and this is why
we need to keep shouting, and like they do, they come to the civic hall and they have a plaque, and on full council day, they'll go to so and so. But what do we do?
And this is why I'm so moved. But when what you started and what you continue doing, because actually, you're absolutely right. We can't wait for anybody to do anything for us, and we are more than capable of doing these things. But often, what we do is we put our effort and energy into their movement because we think it's going to benefit us. And time again, it's shown that actually, they just use our strength, energy, passion to get what they want, and then once that's done, we're sidelined. So I'm currently working with another organization, right, and I'll wrap this up, to start something called a collective movement and collective voting. So what do I mean by collective voting? Well, we all sell our vote, we all give our votes for free. But imagine in each of our communities, we vote collectively. And that can only be done by us talking to each other, by us having difficult conversations within our communities, and we vote collectively. So if you have 20,000 black and brown people in an area, they're voting collectively. They're going to whoever's in charge of that community to say, here's 20,000 votes. These are the areas we have issues with. You give us those, you get our votes. If you don't, we give somebody else who will.
Can I just say, the Asians do that collectively. Within the mosque, they say, we black people, me not like him, so me not vote for him. If I waited for just my black people, I would never be a councillor.
Right.
Because that's how they think, where the Asian do it differently. They might not like you, but they look and they come in the lobby, and that's how they work.
Most communities, I would say, do that. I have a very strong connection within the Jewish community. And within the Jewish community, any largely Jewish areas
Yeah.
they have to have Jewish police.
Yes.
They can't have any other police
Yeah.
patrolling that area.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
We don't, because we don't have that conversation. We are so divided, and that is something that I'm really passionate about, really having difficult conversations that will lead us into talking about mental health, into talking about even state identity in this country. So yeah, I'll just stop.
Thank you so much for that, Michael. That was really, really